Hello, everybody. Today is a very special day because on my right side I have one of the most important and world-known physicians and researchers in a very important field, intestine, gut. And Tom O'Brien is a brilliant scientist. Yesterday we had all the afternoon with his talk. At the final, he had an standing and deserved ovation, and nothing better for our movement, for Brazilian medicine, to know a little about Tom's ideas on gut health. And it's a very pleasure to having you here, Tom.
Thank you so
Welcome to
much.
Brazil.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
First aspect is, by the beginning of the 20th century, I'm sure you are familiar with Professor Ilya Metchnikoff, the eighth physician to be awarded with a Nobel Prize. And at that time, almost 1 century ago, Dr. Metchnikoff used to say that death begins in intestine. Is that true according to the recent knowledge, Tom? What can you tell us about this?
Many of the great physicians in time, going all the way back to Hippocrates, would say that death begins in the colon. And now we have one of your previous guests, Professor Alessio Fasano from Harvard, who tells us all disease begins in the gut. And he has identified the mechanism by which that occurs. He calls it a perfect storm in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. Now we need to understand that 14 of the top 15 causes of death in the world today are chronic inflammatory diseases. That means, unfortunately, when your time comes or my time comes, it will probably be from a chronic inflammatory disease that we did not address because we felt fine, we felt okay, and so we never identified the low level of inflammation that continues and continues. My analogy for this is that if you pull at a chain, it always breaks at the weakest link. It's at one end, the middle, the other end. It's your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys. And the weak link is determined by your genetics and the antecedents. Antecedents mean how you live your life. That if you eat tuna fish 2 or 3 times a week, you likely have mercury toxicity, because almost all of the tuna is high in mercury. So that sets you up, that creates a weak link. And when you pull at the chain too hard, the chain breaks. Well, what's the pull on the chain? The pull on the chain is inflammation. And so we need to identify the triggers of inflammation in our body. That's the basic message, and it all begins in the gut. That's why the greatest physicians in history have said you must address the gut. It doesn't matter what the symptoms are. If they're chronic, you must include, as part of the protocol, addressing the gut.
So, according to your thoughts and your vision, if death begins in the colon, health should also begin in the colon.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. That's why it's critically important to include addressing the gut in any health protocols that we do.
By the way, every single day we see papers in the medical literature showing very clearly that suppose your brain is the first brain, the gut is the second brain. Tom, it seems now things are changing. It's impressive because every day more evidence that it seems that our first brain is the gut and the brain is the second brain. Explain for us this madness. What do you think about this?
It was Professor Michael Gershon in 1999. I believe he was at Princeton. He wrote the book for the general public, The Second Brain. And in that book, they already had the science to tell us for every one message from the brain going down telling the gut what to do, there are 9 messages from the gut going up telling the brain what to do. The ratio is 9 to 1. So who's the boss, right? And it turns out that the boss is the microbiome of your gut. It's directing everything. I'm not sure everything, but it's directing neurotransmitter production and quantities. It's directing cardiovascular function. It's directing detoxification function in the liver. It's directing kidney function. That more and more papers, as you say, every week, new papers are coming out showing us that the metabolites of the bacteria in the gut they get 36% of the small molecules in healthy blood are the metabolites of the microbiome. That's 1/3 of what's in our blood.
Very impressive.
And those metabolites activate the genes in your brain to create more neurotransmitters or less neurotransmitters. They activate the genes in your heart muscle to determine the force of contraction and the heart rate. That we are learning more every week about the impact of the microbiome. And if you have a dysbiotic microbiome, too many bad guys, not enough good guys, then the metabolites of the imbalanced bacteria, the pathogenic bacteria, those metabolites are in higher concentration in the blood. They activate genes of inflammation, pulling on the chain wherever your weak link is.
Very impressive. Another very impressive conclusion is that every day we see papers in literature showing that millions and millions of neurons are found in intestine, in gut.
Yes.
It's absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And, it's a very open field, very brand new knowledge bring into medical field every single day. And it seems that we have concentrate all our efforts, even if we are committed with treating health,
Yes.
not just waiting for disease. Begin all investigation from the gut, no matter if your patient have symptomatic or not symptomatic. Mainly asymptomatic patients are very worried about these people because they think they feel nothing, they are healthy, and we know this is not true. And
Yes.
one of the most important fields of research of Dr. O'Brien is gluten. And a lot of disinformation, misinformation you can find in this field. Many people say, many physicians, nutritionists, healthcare professionals tell their patients that, no worry, gluten is not that bad. Don't worry, if you have tested negative for gluten sensitivity, you don't have to worry. Just live your life. And we know this is very, very wrong, and this is dangerously wrong and deadly wrong. What can you tell us about gluten, Tom, in your experience? Is that bad? Good guy, bad guy?
The good, the bad, the ugly. You said something very important, that if the tests come back negative, that's very important because doctors believe that the tests are accurate. I challenge doctors all the time to do a double blind. A double blind means when you draw blood from a patient, take 2 tubes, not just 1 tube, take 2 tubes, label the second tube, send it to the laboratory at the same time, ordering the same test. And when the results come back, you see how accurate your laboratory is. And unfortunately, too many times, there are large differences between the two. It's because the sensitivity and specificity of the laboratory tests is usually in the 70 to 80, 85% range, which means it's wrong 1, 2, 3 out of 10 times. It's wrong because it's completely wrong. But that was the technology for ELISA, for the types of testing that we do most of the time. The technology is from the 1980s, the 1990s. There's new technology now. The new technology is called silicone chip technology. And they can look at thousands of antigens in one blood draw with 97 to 99% sensitivity and 98 to 100% specificity. Right on the money every time. And when you do double blinds of silicone chip technology, they come back the same. And so I did double blinds 3 times. And I said, okay, that's enough. They've proved themselves. And so I don't need to do that anymore. I now am very comfortable with silicone chip technology. Unfortunately, it's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars for a laboratory to change to the upgraded equipment. And I haven't seen any laboratory that's done that yet from other than the initial laboratory called Vibrant Wellness. And I don't work for Vibrant. They're just the best tests in the world. I travel the world. I lecture in Europe, here in Brazil. I've not been to Asia, so I don't know about Asia, but anywhere else, at the breaks of the conferences, I walk around to see the vendors in the exhibition area, and I've looked at all the labs, and I look at their catalogs. No one has anything that compares to the accuracy of silicone chip technology.
I personally believe, and as well as many physicians of this group, that there is a misconception regarding gluten, very serious misconception, that is, if you eat gluten and develop a celiac disease, you have a disease because you ate gluten. But on the other hand, all the rest of the world that will not develop celiac disease will develop different diseases.
That's right.
Caused by the very same reason.
Wherever the weak link is.
What's your vision about this? How can you deal on a daily basis with patients to explain this? You are not going to be celiac, but maybe you can get another different, an autoimmune disease or a very different disease that will never attach to the basic cause that you're taking gluten in this deadly food choice.
Yes. What we have to understand is that inflammation is the pull that causes whatever degenerative disease occurs. Psoriasis, alopecia, Alzheimer's, they're inflammation-related diseases. Wheat triggers inflammation in everyone. Now, here in Brazil, we know 43% of the population carries the genes for celiac disease, but somewhere between 1 to 4% get celiac. Why not the others? They have the gene. Why don't they get it? They haven't been pulling on the chain as hard in their lifestyle, in the amount of chemicals they're exposed to. It's a threshold. When you cross a threshold, now you have an inflammatory degenerative condition. And if the genetics are for celiac, it's celiac. If the genetics are multiple sclerosis, it's multiple sclerosis. And just look at the studies on gluten and antibodies to myelin basic protein. When you put these people on a gluten-free diet, their antibodies to myelin go down. People with rheumatoid, when you put them on a gluten-free diet, the antibodies to collagen go down. It just depends on where your genetic vulnerability is. But the bigger picture is stop pulling on the chain so hard. And unfortunately, wheat is the most common food in the Western diet. Excuse me. So the most common food, which triggers inflammation, thank you, in everyone. It's the most common food that triggers inflammation, and that inflammation occurs in everyone.
By the way, Tom gave us a very important information yesterday, very impressive as well. An exposure of just 1 billion of a grain of gluten start a very deep inflammatory reaction modulated by toll-like receptor 4. Yeah. It's absolutely crazy because some people think that they have to eat from a certain amount of gluten forward to get some problem, but it's not true.
Correct.
It seems that just you breathe near something that contains gluten, you get
it's called Baker's asthma from breathing flour. Yes.
Crazy,
yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
So, Tony, what can you tell us in terms of practical aspects, management, practical rules and advices you can share with these people that are watching us right now, how to deal with this and how to live in this very complicated world?
For many years, I would do talks around the world, and it was entitled The Conundrum of Gluten Sensitivity. That people would do the test comes back negative. But if they eat wheat, their symptoms get worse, but the test is negative. So the doctors say, oh, just cut down a little bit. It's the test. The test is not accurate. That's why I spoke to silicone chip technology, because now in the US, at least in the US, we now have the science and the technology for accurate testing. So as long as you have total immunoglobulin levels that are adequate, the tests are very accurate. Everywhere else in the world that doesn't have that level of testing, you do the tests that are available. If they come back negative, then you just have to do an elimination diet, and unfortunately, you base the results for the patient on how they feel. And I do not like basing results on how you feel. Why? Because the last step before diagnosis of a disease is you get symptoms. But the symptoms have been developing for many years before you cross the threshold where you feel bad. The mechanism was going on for many years. So if we're basing it on symptoms, we're pretty far down the road already. Unfortunately, if the tests come back negative, then you have to base it on symptoms. And so from there, you give your patients the recommendation, give me 3 weeks. 3 weeks, no gluten whatsoever. Let's see what happens. And you educate them on how to do that successfully, not with gluten-free pasta and gluten-free breads, but with vegetables, lots of vegetables, many different colors of vegetables, healthy meats, little bit of grains, rice, quinoa, amaranth, little bit maybe, but mostly fruits, vegetables, healthy meats, and adequate protein, and watch what happens within 3 weeks. Patients feel better. Now, whether that will be enough for them to be motivated to continue, because people are addicted to wheat. It's the most common food in the Western diet. So it's a conundrum. It's difficult for the clinician to stand their ground if they don't have the tests. So if the test comes back positive, great, you've got them. You go, look, here's the results. But if the tests come back negative, then you have to base it on elimination diet and symptomatology.
Well, certainly we should spend one whole day in this talk, but I think the main message were sent to you, and I would like to say that it's a big honor having a researcher of this big with us here in Brazil, and your contribution to develop of medicine in this country. We're very proud to having you here, and I hope you come back soon to give us this gift, your knowledge and your contribution. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank
and
you.
God bless you.
Thank you so much.